Today we have a part 2 of the story about wife who had threesome and husband who is taking his revenge. First part you can watch here. But now we will talk about his revenge. And believe me, this revenge is wild. I started my revenge with Tony, who was the black guy that had sex with Marianne. He held a knife on me and I sat there and took it, watching my wife have sex and him laughing at me. I followed him a couple of times to a bar near where he lived. I always kept my distance and never went in. It was pretty much a mixed bar but predominantly black. Tony would often go there on Saturday nights, and once in a while during the week, and stay for an hour or so. He would ride his motorcycle and park it in the back so no one would mess with it. It was late on a Wednesday night that I followed him to the bar. It was a pretty light night for bars since it was a weeknight. It was a dreary dark night and not much was happening. I waited an hour and was parked in a lot next to the bar. It was near midnight when he came out. I looked all around and didn't see anyone. I put a mask over my face. Kind of like a cold weather mask. I took my ball bat and went up behind him. He didn't hear me due to starting his cycle. I swung the bat and caught him across the small of the back. I swung 2 more times, hitting his arms, which he raised to protect his head. He did have his helmet on but still got his bell rung. I swung one last time and caught him in the ribs. He never had a chance to retaliate or see who I was. He fell off his bike, which stopped running as he fell to the pavement in utter pain. He seemed to be conscious but barely. I headed back to my truck and went home. I guess I was lucky that no one had seen me. It was a stupid thing to do, but sometimes we all do things we shouldn't. It was in the papers the next day that a man was beaten behind the bar. They had no witnesses and no suspects. There was no one that would think I was involved, seeing it was nearly 5 months ago that he fucked my ex-wife, and it was never mentioned in court. Maybe this dissolution turned out better for me. I would have liked for Tony to have known it was me, but that would have caused a whole new set of problems up the road. The next time I had stopped in for breakfast, Kathy asked me if I read about Tony getting beat up. I told her I had, but I didn't know much about the area. I'm happy he got his payback. Probably was some other husband getting even with him, I said. Kathy stared at me but never asked me if I was involved. The problem would have been that I wouldn't have wanted to lie to her. I did get some satisfaction from beating him. Too bad he didn't know it was me. But again, that could present some long-term problems. He was in the hospital for a week with multiple bruises and fractures. He would be out of work for a month. According to the reports, he had no idea who it was because the person was wearing a mask. He didn't even know if his attacker was black or white. Good thing I wore gloves. It was now time to go after Rob. He was married, so I figured the revenge might be a little easier to attain. I knew that on Saturdays he usually went to see Marianne, thanks to the information I got from Kathy. I figured he told his wife that he was working or out with his friends. That way he had the whole day to be with Marianne. Around noon on Saturday I went to his house. I knew his wife was named Sheila and was in the same graduating class as Rob and Marianne. I knocked on the door and a nice-looking lady answered. I could see 2 small children yelling and playing in the living room. "Can I help you?" asked Sheila. "My name is Jim Holder. I'm not quite sure how to say this to you. Your husband is having sex with my ex-wife." "What? Who are you, again? Who's your wife? Why are you telling me this?" "I'm Jim Holder. My ex-wife is Mary Ann Jennings Holder. She was in your high school. I know who the hell she is. The fucking bitch. How do you know Rob is fucking her? She came out on the porch and closed the door so her kids couldn't hear. We were at a wedding a few months ago and I caught them having sex. I didn't know if it was a one-time thing at the time, but after hearing she had been with him before, I divorced her. Now I find out she has been with him before we were even married and never stopped having sex with him. Now she is pregnant and I believe Rob is the father. I know for sure that I'm not. Why should I believe you? I don't even know you and you come to my house while my husband is at work and accuse him of screwing his old girlfriend. Sounds like you just want revenge." "I do want revenge, but it is the truth. Your husband isn't at work today. He's with Mary Ann at her apartment 40 miles away. He goes there most every week. I can prove it to you." "How are you going to do that?" "I'll call Mary Ann and ask to speak to Rob. Then, I'll hand you the phone. Do you know of any reason why he should be there?" "Hell no. Wait here while I get the phone." She went inside and brought her phone out. I noticed it was a speaker phone, and told her I would use it so she could hear the entire conversation. I dialed my old number and Mary Ann answered the phone. "Mary Ann, this is Jim. What the hell do you want, you fucking wimp? Said Marianne. I know your lover Rob is there and I need to say something to him. Put him on. He's not here. You lying slut. I can hear him in the background talking. Hand him the damn phone. She handed Rob the phone and I gave Sheila her phone. What the fuck do you want, you fucking pervert? Want to watch me fuck your ex-wife again? He started laughing. Sheila yelled, you fucking bastard. So you're back sleeping with your slut whore again. Well, I have news for you, you bastard. You can just stay there, we're through. Just to get even with your cheating ass, I'm going to fuck Jim. Two can play this game. Rob mumbled a bunch of shit that didn't make much sense. He was trying to make excuses, but Sheila told him to go to hell, that he was a lying cheating bastard, and she was getting a divorce. After she hung up she told me she had no intention of having sex with me. She just said it to get even with Rob. She was a mother and had 2 children to raise. Between her job and the alimony she would get from Rob, she would do quite well. She actually thanked me for telling her the truth. If Rob should ever ask me if I had sex with her I was welcome to say yes, but in court for the divorce she would be telling the truth. I did tell her she needed me as a witness in her divorce case, that I would be willing to testify. I left feeling both good and bad. I got revenge on Rob, but I hurt Sheila and broke up her marriage. She did tell me she thought he had been cheating on her, but never had the evidence on who it might be with. I had to wonder why Rob would have a fling with Marianne with a nice-looking woman like Sheila and 2 kids at home that cared for him. Some guys are just born assholes, and because some were school athletes they still think they're studs. Guys like Rob needed to grow up. Sheila did kick his ass out. He couldn't stay with Marianne because it was too far away from his work. When Kathy found out about it she wasn't mad at me. If anything she said her sister deserved it. Her parents were surprised that Rob had cheated on his wife with Marianne. Rob moved in temporarily with Ben and his mother. Ben was divorced a couple of years back. His wife left him for another man. He moved back in with his mother. I did find out that his mom was divorced when Ben was a teenager. She pretty much raised him alone. I guess a lot of us were raised by a single parent. She was a bartender at a neighborhood bar. She had asked Ben not to be a customer there because it made her feel uncomfortable watching him drink the way his father did. She didn't have a problem with Rob moving in temporarily till he could find a place. In case you're wondering, I got most of my information with small talks with Kathy when I stopped in for breakfast. Marianne was getting bigger and would be having her baby in another month or so. According to Kathy, Rob wasn't the kind of guy that could take care of himself. He needed a woman to take care of him. Kathy said that Marianne came to visit her parents one weekend and brought Rob along. According to Kathy, Rob used his razzle-dazzle to explain that he and Sheila had been on the outs for quite some time. When he saw Marianne at the wedding he remembered how much she cared for her. He began seeing her after I filed for divorce. Damn, he could lie. They became close friends again, and now he asked her to marry him. He knew she was going through a lot, and they would wait till after the baby was born and his divorce was final. They figured they would find a place near Steubenville to live so Marianne and the baby would be near her parents. He got a promotion at the mill so Marianne wouldn't have to work if she didn't want to. He did say he would be a good father to the baby, even though it was mine. Marianne's parents accepted him, lock, stock and barrel. Kathy said she couldn't believe all the bullshit the 2 of them put out. She did her best not to say anything, and would just bide her time till school was out. If you haven't figured it out by now, Marianne was always their favorite. In their eyes she could do no wrong. Needless to say, Kathy and Marianne were pretty much opposites. I wanted to be with Kathy, but she was so busy with working at the restaurant, taking her nursing classes, and also helping out at the hospital as a nurse's aide. Maybe our time would come, she always told me. I went into the bar with 4 of my friends after work. I couldn't believe it when I saw Rob and Ben sitting there. I didn't know whether to avoid them or confront them. I didn't have much choice when Rob said, "Hey Jim, I'm fucking your old lady again. You fucked up my marriage, but I still have your ex to fuck." They started laughing. "So you're fucking a pregnant cunt who was willing to give out to your friends. Aren't you the lucky one? What do you say you and I step outside and settle this little shouting match? Or, are you afraid of going one-on-one?" "Right. There were only 2 of us and 4 of you, evenly matched," he laughed. "The minute I beat your ass they'll all jump in." "You mean the way you had it 3-to-1 at the wedding? She fucking asked for it and you know it. By the way, you stay the fuck away from Sheila and my kids if you know what's good for you. I don't need a ready-made family. I'll let you support them. I do have to say that Sheila is one fucking nice woman, not like the slut I was married to. Looks to me that you hooked your horse up to the wrong wagon. My friends and I went over and got a booth and had a few beers. I could see Rob and Ben talking and would like to jump my ass, but I was with 3 other guys. I would gladly take on either one as long as it was one-on-one. I went up and got us some more beers, and I heard Ben call me a cuckold on the way back. I looked at him and said, "You're next on my list." I know they had to wonder if it was me that beat up Tony months ago, but there was absolutely no proof. Ben did say, "Hey man, I got no wife or sisters to fuck. No marriage to mess up. What you gonna do, fuck my old lady?" He laughed. I headed back to my table, but I do have to admit that Ben's idea wasn't without merit. My buddies and I left the bar without incident. They did tell me that they would have my back if I ever needed them. The following Saturday night I went by myself to a bar I'd never been to before. It was a small neighborhood bar with about a dozen customers. Everyone looked at me, seeing they probably knew everyone who ever came into the place. I sat at the end of the bar and ordered a beer. The bartender was Ben's mother. She was probably in her late 40s and was beginning to show her age. She had a few visible tattoos. After setting down my beer, she asked me if I wanted anything else. It was after midnight, but I asked her if it was possible to get anything to eat. "The cook's gone, but I could rustle you up a ham sandwich if you like." I told her that would be great. I hadn't eaten most of the day. She served the other customers and went back and made my sandwich. It had ham, mayo, lettuce, tomato and cheese. I got a bag of chips to eat with it. Within the hour, most of the customers had left. There were 2 couples still sitting in the booth. Helen was cleaning off the bar and came over to talk to me. "You're new here. Where are you from?" "I recently got divorced and moved to West Virginia. I work in the lumber yard. I was riding through town and saw this place and decided to get a beer and a bite to eat." "I'm Helen. I've been here for 15 years. We don't get many young guys here. They usually want to pick up some young chick, and we don't get many of those," she smiled. "We're just a small town community bar." "I could use that too," I laughed. "It's been a while since the divorce." I smiled at Helen. She wasn't a bad-looking woman. She wore a low-cut blouse that showed some nice cleavage. She wasn't overweight, in fact she was on the thinner side. I began kidding with her and she was flirting back. We talked for a while, and she told me her son moved back in with her, and now has his asshole friend living with them for a few months. She said he was getting a divorce also. "Must be something in the water," she said and smiled. "My ex did a gangbang and I caught her in the middle of it. I walked out never to return," I replied. "Damn, honey. Sorry to hear that." We continued talking. Helen was nice and personable. I decided to go for it. "Helen, what are you doing after work?" "What? Are you really trying to pick me up?" She smiled. "Honey, I'm old enough to be your mother. Mothers like sex too. I'm just passing through and we'll probably never see each other again." After smiling, she walked away and took care of the last customers in the booth. She told them it was last call. She came back to the counter. "Look, it's been a while for me too since I've been with a young man like you. I have to finish cleaning up and restocking the bar, and then we could go somewhere." I went behind the bar and helped her restock it. She smiled when she saw that I was helping her out. The last couple had left and we finished cleaning up the bar. I mentioned to her that I noticed there was a couch and a small bed in the back. I had seen it when I got stock from the back room. "It's for passed out drunks and the like. Haven't had many lately. I've slept there a few times if I had too much to drink and didn't want to drive home." We went to the room in the back. On the way she shut off 2 cameras. I asked what they were for, and she told me one for the main bar and the other for the room in back. "Can't be too careful anymore." After turning off the camera she said, "We don't want to be on video," and she laughed. As she went to freshen up I pulled out the disc she had in the backroom video camera and put in a new one and turned it back on. She came out of the restroom and said, "Let's see what you got, honey." After peaceful and full of love hour, she fell asleep. I covered her with the sheet. I went over to the camera, turned it off and took out the disc and put the old one back in. I left out the back door because it self-locked. Now it was time to go back and see my old friends Rob and Ben. Things sure change in a hurry. One day everything is going along fine and the next day boom. Everything changes. It was on a Saturday and Kathy was working at Bob Evans. I went and sat in her section. It wasn't as crowded as usual, so we had a chance to talk a little. My feelings for her were strong, but not much I could do about it. As I was ordering my breakfast, I saw her look up at another customer. My back was to them and I had no idea who it was. Then I heard a voice, "Fuck, Kathy, I didn't know they served cuckolds in here. If you need a man, just let me know and I'll fix you up with a real one. No need to whore around with this asshole." I knew the voice, it was Rob. Kathy looked scared but didn't say anything. Everything happened in a flash. I jumped up from my booth, turned around and cold-cocked Rob with the right cross. I hit him and he hit the floor. It was then I noticed that Marianne was with him. She had already sat down with her big belly. She was due just about any time, I thought. She screamed as I jumped on Rob and hit him again. I looked back and both Marianne and Kathy were crying. I had to wonder who was crying for whom. I was taken off to jail. I called my lawyer and he said that I was going to be arraigned on Monday on the charges of assault. I would be spending Saturday and Sunday in lockup. It wasn't worth posting bail until after the arraignment if the charges stuck. I had plenty of time to think. I had a somewhat fucked up childhood, and then ended up marrying a whore, but was in love with her sister. When you're in jail, you do a lot of thinking about what could have been. I figured Kathy wouldn't be talking to me anymore if I was lucky enough not to serve much time. Maybe somehow, some way I could start over, but I would prefer to do it with Kathy. I couldn't get her out of my mind, and I've never even kissed her like you would a girlfriend. I was arraigned first thing Monday morning. I did call into work to let them know I wouldn't be there on Monday and why. I was to call my boss after the arraignment so he would know when I might be coming back. I figured if I had to do some real time, like months, I'd lose my job. It was a small courtroom with a judge and a witness stand. On one side was Rob with his face bruised and his mouth wired up. Sitting next to him was Marianne staring darts at me. Behind them was Mr. and Mrs. Jennings, Marianne and Kathy's parents. More darts were coming my way. On my side was me and my lawyer. I wondered why Kathy wasn't there. She was a prime witness to what really happened. Other people who were there was the two patrolmen who arrested me. We hadn't said two words the whole time I was in the cruiser, except they talked about me ruining their breakfast. There were a few other courtroom people, but I really didn't know their positions. I'd never been in court before but the one time for my divorce dissolution hearing. The judge began by saying this was an arraignment whether I would be charged with assault and have a criminal trial. The atmosphere was a little lighter, but that he still ran a strict courtroom. He spoke to my lawyer. "Mr. Williams, you said that you have a witness that could explain this whole mess your client finds himself in. Since Mr. Rob Avery isn't able to speak, I would like to hear from this witness." Kathy came walking into the courtroom. Everyone seemed a bit shocked that she was there. She didn't look at me or her parents, but went right to the witness chair. The clerk or some lady who was wearing a uniform swore her in. "Miss Jennings, would you tell us exactly what you observed on the morning in question?" asked the judge. "Well, sir, I'm a waitress at the restaurant. Jim, that's Mr. Holder there, comes in regularly and usually sits in my section as he did that morning. As we were talking I saw Rob Avery and my sister Marianne come in, and they started toward my section." "So the woman next to Mr. Avery is your sister, I presume?" said the judge. "Yes, and Mr. Avery is her fiancé. They're to be married in a couple of months." I could see Kathy was really nervous. I felt so sorry for her, I wanted to hold her. "Go on, Miss Jennings, what did you observe?" Jim's back was to Mr. Avery. He never saw who it was till he turned around. I'm sure he knew his voice when he heard him. "What did you hear Mr. Avery say to the defendant?" He actually said it more to me than he did to Jim. I think that was what got Jim so mad. Jim has been called names by Rob a lot of times, but this time he called me names as well as Jim, and Jim retaliated by hitting him. He did more than just hit him, he broke his jaw. "What did he say?" asked the judge. "He called Jim a cuckold and told me that if I wanted to whore around he would find me a real man, not one that lets other men fuck his wife." I looked over at the Jennings and they didn't seem very happy. Marianne just looked down. Kathy continued. "Jim jumped up, turned around and socked Rob. He went down and Jim called him an asshole and hit him again. I yelled for Jim to stop and he did. That's when the officers came over and arrested Jim and called the paramedics to help Rob Mr. Avery there." The judge thought for a moment and asked Kathy what brought all this on. "Why did Mr. Avery call Mr. Holder a cuckold? This seems to be the basis of the case. Do you any idea why, Miss Jennings?" "Yes, sir," Jim told me. "It all started at my cousin's wedding nearly 9 months ago. Jim said that he saw my sister, Mary Ann, having sex with 3 men. He said it was consensual. Mary Ann stood up and said it wasn't true. Mrs. Holder, what part isn't true? Did you or did you not have sex that night with someone other than your husband? Mary Ann just started crying and sat down. The judge didn't wait for an answer. The judge asked Rob to stand up. Mr. Avery, I know it's hard for you to talk, but all you have to do is nod your head. Remember, you are in a court of law, you're under oath, and if you perjure yourself you could be arrested. On the night in question, did you have sexual relations with Mrs. Holder? Rob nodded, yes. The judge said the record should reflect Mr. Avery's affirmative response. Did anyone else also have relations that same night with Mrs. Holder? Rob looked over at Mary Ann and then back at the judge, and again Rob nodded yeses. And the judge said the same thing about the record. Mr. and Mrs. Jennings went to get up to leave the courtroom, but the judge told them to stay seated till the hearing was over. Thank you, Miss Jennings, you've been most helpful. You may be seated. She wasn't sure where to sit, so she sat with her parents. They didn't look very happy with her testimony. He did ask the officers if there was anything they could add, and they said they just did what Miss Jennings stated. They called the ambulance for Mr. Avery, and helped the pregnant Mrs. Jennings to her vehicle. They did say that I didn't speak the whole time I was in the cruiser. The judge then asked Mary Ann if she had anything she wanted to say. After all, it was a hearing whether to drop the charge against me or charge me with assault. Mary Ann said that she had nothing to add. She did say she was sorry for what happened but didn't elaborate. The judge spoke. He asked Rob to stand. Mr. Avery, it seems that this incident was caused by you badgering the defendant who retaliated in kind. I'm not saying that he is not responsible for your medical bills. As I understand it, you have insurance, and it paid all but $200 of your expenses. Is that correct? Rob nodded, yes. Mr. Holder, please stand, said the judge. I understand your retaliation, but you can't go around hitting people because you don't like what they say about you or your girlfriend. I thought even the judge knew I cared for Kathy. You are responsible for Mr. Avery's unpaid medical bills in the amount of $200. You must pay it within 1 week. I'm putting you on 6 months probation for fighting in a public place. If you come to my courtroom again and are caught fighting, or otherwise disturbing the peace, you will serve the balance of the 6 months, plus any other sentence for anything else you do. Is that understood? Yes, Judge, thank you. I'll do my best to stay out of trouble. Rob and Mary Ann left the courtroom madder than when they came in. Kathy told her parents that she was brought up by them to always tell the truth, and that is what she did. She never told them about Mary Ann because she asked her not to. Besides, there was no proof except for me, and they would never believe me over Mary Ann. They turned around and looked at me. Kathy smiled, but the Jennings looked furious, and walked out of the courtroom. My lawyer and I walked out and he told me to keep my nose clean. He also said I owed Kathy big time. I knew there was no doubt there. So guys, tell me your thoughts about this part. And thanks to DG here for this story. If you want to know Ben's reaction on what he did with his mom, drop a like and subscribe my channel. Next part will be tomorrow. Cheers.